Most fans think Brazil survived Japan because Brazil had better players. That is the easy version. The harder truth is that Japan spent almost an hour showing Brazil exactly where the machine was broken. And Brazil only escaped because the final twist belonged to the bench, not the starting 11. That is why this match matters. Not because Brazil beat Japan. Brazil are supposed to beat Japan. It matters because for most of the night in Houston, the game was not behaving like a Brazil game at all. It behaved like a test of age, a test of structure, a test of whether reputation still means anything when a disciplined opponent knows where to press, where to wait, and where to strike. Brazil won 2-1. Sano scored first for Japan in the 29th minute. Casemiro equalized with a header in the 56th. Gabriel Martinelli won it in stoppage time. Simple scoreline, messy story. Because the first twist was not the late goal. The first twist was that Japan did not look surprised to be there. When most fans imagine Brazil against Japan, they imagine yellow shirts, quick feet, wide dribbles, and a favorite slowly bending the match toward its own rhythm. But Japan did something smarter. They refused to make the match about Brazil's rhythm. They made it about Brazil's first mistake. That is the hidden mechanism of this game. Japan were not trying to out-Brazil Brazil. They were trying to turn Brazil's comfort into a trap. In simple terms, Japan used a compact defensive block. A block is just the shape a team keeps when it does not have the ball. Compact means the distances between players stay short, so the opponent sees less space and has fewer clean passing lanes. That sounds defensive, but it was not passive. There is a difference. A passive defense waits and hopes. Japan waited and hunted. Brazil had more of the ball. Brazil had more territory. Brazil had the names. But the key question was not who owned the ball. The key question was who controlled the dangerous moments. For half an hour, Japan controlled them. Vinícius Júnior was the first clue. Usually, he is the accelerant. Give him space and the entire match starts leaning toward panic. Fullbacks retreat. Midfielders cheat wide. Center backs start pointing at each other like a group project going badly. But Japan squeezed the space around him. Takehiro Tomiyasu and Ritsu Don helped close the channel on Brazil's left side. They did not need to win every duel. They needed to make every duel arrive half a second late. Half a yard narrow, half a decision slower. That is the first lesson. At knockout level, stopping the star is rarely one man's job. It is a neighborhood watch. Then came the second twist. The goal did not arrive from a long spell of Japanese possession. It arrived from Brazil's own buildup. Danilo's loose pass opened the door. Sano stepped through it. Casemiro could not close the distance. Sano drove forward and finished low. Suddenly, the favorite was not just behind. The favorite had been diagnosed. That is a cruel feeling in football. Conceding from a corner can feel like a moment. Conceding from a deflection can feel like weather. But conceding from a mistake in your own structure feels personal. It says the opponent did not just beat you. They read you. Japan had read Brazil's tempo. They had read the heavy legs in midfield. They had read the risk in playing forward without clean angles. And in that moment, the match stopped being about talent. It became about response. This is where the word twist actually matters. A twist is not just something surprising. A twist is when the meaning of the game changes. Before Sano's goal, Brazil looked like a team trying to unlock Japan. After Sano's goal, Brazil looked like a team trying to unlock itself. That's a much harder problem. Because when Brazil trail at a World Cup, the pressure is not normal pressure. It is historical pressure. 5 stars on the shirt do not run for you. They sit on your shoulders. Every loose touch becomes a national conversation. Every slow pass becomes a tactical scandal. Every camera cut to the bench becomes a referendum on the manager. And this is where Carlo Ancelotti's role becomes important. Not because he shouted, not because he discovered some secret football spell in the dressing room. Because he understood the real problem. Brazil did not need more possession. They needed more threat. There's a difference. Possession is having the ball. Threat is making the opponent believe the next action can hurt them. In the first half, Brazil had possession without enough threat. Japan could survive that. They could shift, close, block, and wait for Brazil to become impatient. So Ancelotti changed the question. He introduced Endrick and moved Brazil toward a 4-2-3-1 shape. That shape uses 4 defenders, 2 deeper midfielders, 3 attacking midfielders or wide attackers, and 1 central forward. The simple idea is width, support, and a clearer target. Brazil began attacking the box more directly. They used crosses, they used second balls. They made Japan defend facing their own goal. And that is a different type of stress. Japan were comfortable defending patterns in front of them. They were less comfortable when Brazil forced the ball into the air, into the box, and into repeated recovery moments. That leads to the third twist. Casemiro, the man who looked exposed on Japan's goal, became the man who brought Brazil back. Football enjoys this kind of irony too much. 1 minute, you are the slow leg in the highlight. The next, you are rising above everyone to head your country level. It is a brutal sport with a very tidy sense of drama. Gabriel Magalhaes delivered the ball. Casemiro attacked it. Brazil were level. But the equalizer was more than a goal. It changed the emotional ownership of the match. Before 1-1, Japan's discipline had a reward. After 1-1, Japan's discipline became a burden. That is one of the least understood parts of knockout football. When an underdog leads, every defensive action feels heroic. When the favorite equalizes, the same defensive action can start to feel like survival. The body notices, the mind notices, the bench notices. Brazil noticed too. Vinícius nearly turned the match almost immediately, forcing another crisis near the Japanese goal. Japan was still brave, still organized, still dangerous. But the game had begun to tilt. Not completely, just enough. And in tournament football, just enough can become everything. This is where the 2026 World Cup format adds another layer. For the first time, the expanded tournament has a round of 32. That means more teams, more knockout matches, and more moments where favorites face opponents with nothing to lose and are playing good enough to make them uncomfortable. The old idea was simple: survive the group. Then the real tournament begins. But in this version, the bridge between the group stage and the deeper rounds is more dangerous. There's one extra knockout step, one extra emotional tax, one extra night where your tournament can become a headline you do not want. Germany and the Netherlands also felt that kind of danger in the same round, according to the wider match reports from the day. That matters because Brazil's scare was not isolated. It was part of a pattern. The expanded World Cup does not only give more nations a seat at the table, it gives more organized teams a chance to turn one perfect plan into one historic wound. Japan nearly did that. And this is the fourth twist. Japan did almost everything right and still lost. That sounds unfair? It is. Welcome to knockout football. There's no fairness department. There's only the next action. Japan's mid-low block worked. Their pressing triggers worked. Their emotional discipline worked. Their first goal proved the plan. But plans do not end matches. Players do. As the second half deepened, Brazil's bench became the difference. Endrick had helped change the energy. Martinelli arrived later and gave Brazil another runner, another angle, another problem for tired defenders. This is the kind of depth that separates elite tournament squads from excellent tournament performances. Japan produced an excellent performance. Brazil had the squad depth to keep asking new questions. That is not a romantic explanation. It is the cold one. At the World Cup, a nation's best 11 can get you into the story. Its 15th, 16th, and 17th players can decide whether the story continues. Martinelli's winner at the end was not just a moment of individual sharpness. It was the final consequence of Brazil's second-half pressure. Tanaka lost the ball near danger. Bruno Guimaraes found the pass. Martinelli finished. One touch of panic, one pass of clarity, one finish. Japan's dream collapsed inside a few seconds. That is why stoppage time feels different in knockout football. It is not just time added by the referee. It is time added by fear. Every tired clearance has a little more wobble. Every pass has a little more history attached to it. Every mistake feels louder because there may be no next phase, no next match, no next morning where the table still gives you a chance. For Tanaka, That mistake became the frame everyone remembered. For Japan, it became another chapter in a painful World Cup pattern. They have repeatedly reached the knockout rounds, repeatedly shown quality, and repeatedly been denied the next door. That is not failure in the simple sense. It is something more frustrating. It is progress that keeps arriving at the same locked gate. And yet this is also where the fifth twist appears. Japan lost the match, but they changed the reading of Brazil. Before this game, Brazil could be discussed as a contender with the normal language. Quality, depth, experience, Ancelotti. Vinícius, the familiar yellow gravity. After this game, the conversation has to include a warning. Can Brazil handle fast, organized pressure in midfield? Can they protect older legs in transition? Can they generate threat early enough against teams that block the wide lanes? Can they keep relying on late correction when the next opponent might not forgive the first half? That is the real value of Japan's performance. They gave Brazil a problem sheet, and Brazil gave everyone else the answer key, but only partly. The answer was not simply play better, it was increase the tempo, add fresh runners, turn possession into penalty box stress, use aerial routes when the ground routes are blocked. Trust experience, but do not let experience become the only plan. Casemiro's night captures the whole match. He was part of the problem. Then he became part of the solution. Then he left with an apparent leg issue, which adds another uncomfortable question for Brazil. That is tournament football in one player, useful, vulnerable, heroic, fragile. Most fans prefer clean stories. The veteran silences critics. The substitute saves the nation. The underdog nearly makes history. The favorite survives. But the better story is not clean. The better story is that all of those things were true at once. Brazil were exposed and impressive. Japan were defeated and validated. Ancelotti was under pressure and decisive. Casemiro was blamed and celebrated. Martinelli was not the starting headline, then became the final line. Every twist changed the meaning of the previous one. Japan's goal made Brazil look old. Casemiro's header made experience look priceless. Martinelli's winner made the bench look essential. Tanaka's mistake made discipline look breakable. And the final whistle made the whole match feel less like a simple upset scare and more like a warning about the new World Cup. Because this tournament is not built for comfort. The 48-team format creates more routes, more emotional traps, and more chances for strong systems to attack famous shirts. A big name can still win. Brazil proved that. But a big name can also be dragged into the kind of match where one bad pass becomes national stress. Japan proved that. So what should we take from Brazil 2-1 Japan? First, Japan are no longer a team that simply participates in these matches. They can design them. Second, Brazil's depth is real. When the starting structure struggled, the bench changed the rhythm and the result. Third, Brazil's vulnerability is also real. Their midfield and build-up can be pressed into discomfort, especially when the opponent is compact, brave, and patient. Fourth, knockout football does not reward the team with the cleaner plan. It rewards the team that survives the last mistake. That is the uncomfortable part. Japan may have produced the sharper plan. Brazil produced the final action. And at the World Cup, the final action has a way of rewriting the whole newspaper. There's also a deeper football intelligence lesson here. Modern tournaments are no longer only about who has the most stars. They're about who can solve problems quickly enough before the clock turns a flaw into an elimination. That is why coaches matter more than ever. That is why benches matter more than ever. That is why systems matter more than ever. The team that starts the match is not always the team that wins it. Sometimes the winning team is created during the match, adjustment by adjustment, substitution by substitution, pressure by pressure. Brazil did not begin the night with all the answers. They had to find them in public. That is dangerous. It is also what champions often have to do. In 2002, Brazil's last World Cup winning side had stars, but it also had a clear tournament identity. In 1998, Brazil reached the final, but the tournament also showed how quickly expectation can become weight. In 2014, the 7-1 defeat to Germany became the ultimate reminder that history does not defend crosses, track runners, or protect you from tactical collapse. Those examples matter because Brazil carry more than a squad. They carry memory. Every Brazil World Cup team is compared to ghosts. Some glorious, some painful, some still sitting in the room even when nobody says their name. Against Japan, those ghosts were not the story, but they were close enough to make the night feel heavier. That is why Martinelli's goal released so much emotion. It was not just relief from a scoreline, it was relief from a possibility. The possibility that Brazil, in a game they were expected to control, could become the next giant headline of the expanded knockout round. They avoided that, barely. And barely is not an insult. Barely is often how tournaments are won. The difference between crisis and momentum can be one finish in the 96th minute. The difference between bravery and heartbreak can be one loose touch near your own box. The difference between a tactical masterclass and a sad flight home can be the final phase of the final phase. Japan will know that better than anyone. For Brazil, the message is sharper. This escape cannot be treated only as character. Character is useful. But if every video session becomes a celebration of resilience, the lesson gets wasted. The first half needs to be studied. The pressure around Vinícius needs to be studied. The central tempo needs to be studied. The way Japan turned waiting into pressing needs to be studied, because the next opponent will study it too. That is how knockout football works. One team's scare becomes another team's scouting report. So when people say Brazil survived Japan, they are correct. But survival is only the headline. The explanation is bigger. Brazil survived because experience corrected one mistake, because a manager changed the shape, because fresh legs changed the pressure, because Japan's discipline finally cracked, because the new World Cup gives underdogs more space to build traps, but still gives elite squads the tools to escape them. Every twist pointed to the same conclusion. This was not just Brazil beating Japan. This was Brazil being forced to show how they solve problems when the old football hierarchy stops doing the work for them. And that is the question for the rest of their tournament. Was this the scare that sharpens Brazil, or the warning that exposes them? Tell me in the comments, would you trust Brazil more after this escape or less? Most fans think Brazil survived Japan because Brazil had better players. Now you can see the real story. Brazil survived because Japan exposed the problem, and Brazil found the answer just before the tournament punished them for it.